Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Manila Major Americas Qualifiers. My name is Gorgon the Wonder Cow. I am joined by Korean Barbecue, and we are jumping right into this game because this is EnemyGG's last stand. If they do not win this series, they are mathematically eliminated from Manila. Infamous are out of Manila, I think, regardless of the outcome of this game, but they could still gatekeep against Enemy, who have a long shot chance at victory if they both win this game and then win their series against Evernova, and Digital Chaos lose all the rest of their games. A very long shot, huh, KBBQ?
Seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining. Reserve time.
Yeah, so really the only path to victory that either of these teams have is NMEGG win both their upcoming series and Digital Chaos lose every other game. That is the only path. No, there's one other path, actually. If Digital Chaos 2-0 FDL and NMEGG then beat FDL in a best-of-1 tiebreaker, then they could move on as well. So either Digital Chaos or FDL have to drop the ball in order for EnemyGG to move forward. But they also need to win both games in this series for that to even be a possibility.
Reserve time.
Yeah, it's interesting that the open qualifier team has come out of this group just swinging. I wrote about it on PvP Live earlier today. They just absolutely railroaded into this group stage and came in with the momentum that even today, if they were to drop their series against Digital Chaos, which a lot of people would expect, really the worst that they can expect to happen is that they'll take the lower seed moving into the double elimination bracket. EnemyGG, of course, are definitely looking to turn that around on its head. I suspect EnemyGG expect FDL to lose both matches against Digital Chaos. I think most viewers are as well. They're probably a lot of people skipping that match and possibly moving over to this match instead because of the possible outcomes of this game. This is literally a last chance scenario. And the stakes are much higher for EnemyGG than they are for really any team playing in this group at all through the rest of the day. Following EnemyGG will be interesting. And they're going to grab the Beastmaster to open up the draft.
Seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining.
Doom. Witch Doctor.
Dire team pick.
True.
10 seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining.
Life Stealer.
Radiant team ban.
Yeah, that's not as much a problem in the Americas as it was in Europe, especially because a lot of the European teams, the best opponents that they would be hoping to scrim, weren't available for scrimming because they were traveling after last weekend's We Play Season 3 event, right? So for Europe, it was particularly rough. For the Americas, pretty much every team that would be scrimming for this event was available to scrim at least as recently as a week ago Friday. that has given them a little more opportunity, but it's not the same thing. Scrimming an opponent and playing an opponent with something on the line. As we're about to see, right? EnemyGG especially here, if they look like they're going to lose any ground against Infamous, they are going to dig in their heels as hard as they can. I would be very surprised to see any GG before there's absolutely no possibility of winning. Because once again, this is literally Manila life on the line. So,
10 seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining. Dire team ban.
it's a little early in the draft to kind of tell, but what I can say is that Infamous are picking very popular heroes. EnemyGG, of course, Beastmaster, Lifestealer, both heroes on the rise, but Doom and Witch Doctor are the #1 and #2 most played heroes at the current moment. Lifestealer with the Beastmaster obviously has some synergy. He's able to hop into the Hawk and bomb on people with great deal of surreptitiousness. Is that a word? But Lifestealer also tends to do fairly well against the Doom because Doom is a high health, low armor hero. It'll be interesting to see how Infamous try to handle this Lifestealer because right now they don't have a good way to kite him. Yeah. Yeah, I certainly agree with that. The Slark ban is interesting to me. Slark is a very strong hero. Right now, this patch, he got a couple of items that buff him indirectly. In addition, the playstyle of the patch works really well with him. In that, Slark is a hero that just needs tier 1s to go down, and then he can start to roll through opponent's territory and take it away. He's not particularly farm dependent. He likes to pick on heroes rather than buildings or creeps. But Slark is not necessarily a hero that I would expect to roll through a aggressive mid-game lineup like a Beastmaster Lifestealer implies. The Storm Spirit is going to come out here for Infamous. That may be as much a denial pick as a decision to give it to Infamous. We saw yesterday Infamous are happy to play the Storm Spirit. As you mentioned, Greedy had told you that they were planning on playing that more often, that they felt like that mid-roll had opened up a bit this patch. But the potential for a Storm Spirit Lifestealer bomb is not something to scoff at either. So, simultaneously a decent pick as well as a deny.
Disruptor.
Radiant team pick.
I do like the Disruptor pick here. Not only does Disruptor have multiple ways to cancel out Witch Doctor's ultimate from a safe distance, he can also drop that silence on the Storm Spirit in a way that Storm Spirit is usually not going to itemize against, right? And then, for example, the Yule Scepter build on Storm Spirit that would get rid of an Orchid or a traditional silence won't get rid of the Static Storm. It will just buy you slight amounts of time inside of it. Storm Spirit, or excuse me, the Disruptor also does well against the Storm Spirit because as Storm Spirit runs out of mana, you have the potential for a glimpse back. And, of course, Doom is a hero that likes to get in, get a kill, poke around, run away with that Scorched Earth speed. And Disruptor is able to also bring him back, while simultaneously usually sitting at a pretty close distance. So, or a pretty reasonable distance, I should say. So I do like the Disruptor pick. I don't necessarily know that it synergizes all that well with the Lifestealer Beastmaster, but it provides a lot of answers to what Infamous have.
Seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining.
Lion.
Radiant team ban.
The Lion is a once again a fairly popular support right now. Disruptor support on the rise as well. Lion still rolling on that 686 popularity spike that he saw in the last 3 weeks of that patch. I'm honestly, because of the amount of popularity that he showed and of efficacy, I was surprised to not see Lion take a direct nerf. He's one of the only heroes that I expected to take a direct nerf or direct buff that didn't. In fact, I think he is the only hero that I had predicted a direct nerf on that I believe went untouched entirely. Lion is going to be a great answer to the Naga Siren. The Hex and the Mana Drain are going to be able to knock out 2 of those 4 illusions right away, or, if he gets lucky, immediately determine which Naga is real. Finger of Death is a great burst spell to deal with the Witch Doctor, great burst spell to deal with the Storm Spirit, and even the Doom earlier in the game, although later in the game his health pool, it gets up high enough that he's not quite as afraid of it. But what Lion really doesn't provide is a lot of sustain for his Lifestealer, and this is something that they don't really have. Lifestealer is going to be dependent on himself and a potential mech carrier on his team in order to make sure that he is maintaining his HP pools through extended fights. They don't have, for example, Witch Doctor with Voodoo Restoration or Treant to be able to keep him running in these engagements. So they either need to make engagements very quick, move in, move out, grab the kills, and then roll into objectives, or they need to make sure that Lifestealer is building enough attack speed and potentially a life steal from somebody on a Vlad's to make sure that he is not just being whittled down over time.
5 seconds remaining.
Dragon Knight.
Yeah. Yes.
10 seconds.
Storm does not do particularly well into a Tinker. He's right-click dependent on being able to get his last hits, which means the laser is really effective at denying gold. He, as you mentioned, does get blown up pretty easily, and he has no traditional escape. So for I'm combo and my Dota is freezing up. I hope it doesn't crash. Yeah. For the rotation potential out of a Disruptor Lion, that I think that that's a decent call. The Dragon Knight is still able to cast his Breathe Fire in order to get last hits into the laser. He's a high enough regen and high enough health hero that you wouldn't expect him to necessarily die to a Tinker solo, or even not necessarily to low-level support rotations. But we can go ahead and run through some of our players during this pause for Enemy in their last chance for Manila all-or-nothing match. We've got Banana Slam Jamma slinking around on that Lifestealer, getting ready to play some carry. Over here, we've got Flying Zebra, one of my favorites in North America, giving us the finger on Lion. Frozen is riding around on his prehistoric mount on the Disruptor. Sovereign is calling his woodland friends on the Beastmaster, and Slayer is doing the robot on the Tinker. Yeah, this will be very interesting to watch the Dragon Knight go up into the Tinker, because like I said, he should theoretically be able to do it as well as he would play into any other range spammy hero. But maybe the issue here is that he probably will not be super effective at keeping the Tinker from getting farm himself. One of the nice things about the Breathe Fire, which is now 35% attack reduction on a Tinker, that is pretty effective at making this last hitting difficult, right? Tinker doesn't have a huge base attack to start with, and he has a pretty terrible attack animation. And what that might end up doing is forcing the Tinker to leverage the laser against creeps for last hits instead of leveraging it against Dragon Knight, which is another potential gain from this match.
The battle begins.
Smart money.
And no surprises with the level 1 laser for the Tinker, trying to make sure that he has all the tools necessary in order to zone out this Dragon Knight as effectively as possible. I am interested to see how this Naga Siren ends up working out. We haven't seen a lot of support Naga Siren for several patches. And he's immediately going to come in and try to Riptide down this Tinker, just to try to force out as much of this regen as possible, but he's playing very aggressively in this. So how do you feel about this support Naga Siren? Do you think that is going to scale into the game with the new patch, or is it maybe too greedy? Yeah. Yeah, one of the biggest tools that they actually have is the Siren Song into Lifestealer's Rage, right? I'm going to come back to this because it looks like BSJ wants to grab Greedy. Greedy moving very far forward into his opponent's space, trying to loop all the way around. There's going to be the sun coming out of the line, and now the Disruptor is here too. This is likely, yep, our first blood as the corpse is brought back into the fray. Very nice play by Enemy, a little too aggressive by the Doom, not able to back up because of the rear rotation coming out of his opponents. But anyway, the Lifestealer has Rage naturally built in. If you Siren Song when that Lifestealer rages, he has no allies. He will not fall asleep, but all of his allies will, barring any BKB purchases. And that suddenly turns the fight from a 5-on-5 to a 1-on-5, with the most important hero still targetable by right clicks. If that is timed correctly, it can be absolutely devastating to a Lifestealer or BKB carry lineup. Yeah. Yeah, and not only that, but also if you do have this situation where the Lifestealer is fighting 1-on-5 and all of your opponents are healing, what is it, like 5% per second? He's not going to be able to burst anybody down during that period either. He's just straight up going to have to try and run away from his opponents during the duration of that Siren Song, which will completely upset the pace of the fight for Enemy. Could be very difficult to handle. But on the flip side of that, this Naga Siren is not getting very much right now. She's just kind of floating around. And this isn't a hero that does particularly well as a support with absolutely no levels and farm, right? She does need some movement speed potential. She also needs her mana pool buffed before she's able to really be that effective in fights. Yeah. This is going to be a combat-oriented build on the Tinker, it looks like, not a Bulba build, where you max the Martian Machines for the split push. Slayer seems to want to get in and get dirty, which I think is very, very smart on this patch. The Bulba build worked really well back in the day, but at this stage, sieging towers and defending towers, really just not as difficult or as important as being able to get into fights, quickly eradicate heroes, and make sure that you're taking that gold and experience advantage away from your... Here we go in the mid lane. We're going to have the net coming out from the Naga. A big miss on that air spike will probably be the kill, yeah. And Doom pulled back into the Martian Machines, but there's no mana to follow that back up. Boy, that Earth Spike may not have saved him, but it very well could have. He split the wickets on that one. Yeah. Dragon Knight is sitting on top of the longest level 1 stun in the game, but also the greatest attack damage reduction at this stage in the game as well. I believe, since the change in 687. So when he gets up and in your face, especially if he has allies, at this stage in the game, you really have to do everything you can to not be right next to him. The Dragon Tail's available, but nothing else is. Likely just a bit of frontin'. Yeah. Weird blanket stun coming out of Excel. Now the Lifesteal is going to move in. BSJ popping out of the boar? Or no, some other creep. Just moving on. That was a weird positioning decision by that Witch Doctor. Sort of a what-face moment. As he threw out the paralyzing cast with no bounce potential onto an opponent where he really shouldn't have been anyway. It's kind of a weird death. But, as you mentioned, the Beastmaster is definitely a hero that is level dependent more than farm dependent, especially when you are sitting with a Lifestealer who's a mid-game oriented carry, and you've got some decent control supports with you as well. His ability to close the gap and throw down that Primal Roar is not super contingent on getting a farm. Obviously a Blink Dagger or something is nice, but BSJ is actually going to move on Kotaro, who does have the Ball Lightning and a haste, so he'll probably be okay. Now BSJ turning around. He will end up going down. No, he jumps into the catapult, but he is going to try to run the catapult away. He's being followed by Kotaro. And now Kotaro's going to try to force him out by threatening Frozen. Frozen getting very low. It does work. The Gambit does force out BSJ, who's now going to try to move back onto Kotaro, but just too fast. An easy kill from that high stakes movement. We were talking about this yesterday. Kotaro is a player that sees opportunities where other people don't, and he really loves to play on the edge. Yeah. And in this particular lineup, especially because your opponents are running a Lifesteal and you're running two high blanket health heroes in the Dragon Knight and the Doom, I would say Infamous need more time than Enemy do in order to get going into this mid game. So as much time as they can buy, they should be willing to take. Looks like the armlet is almost done for Lifestealer as well, which is going to probably be the word go on these engagements, especially since Sovereign will be level 6 at that time. Or at least he should be very close to level 6 by that time. And the Lion may even be getting up there at that time as well, because Beastmaster did fall pretty far behind, and is now basically tied up in experience with the Lion.
Radiant's bottom tower is under attack.
Yeah, they see this disruptor and they are going to move on to him. Smoke is revealed from the high ground, but it doesn't matter. There's going to be the net. The stack stuns, and there's no escaping. Yeah, that poor disruptor. Now Lion has a sense of what's going on here. He knows there are two heroes over here, and he needs to back up into the safety of his tower or just get away. And he's going to do neither. He's going to actually run in between his towers, and that's probably a death for him. No stun available yet. There it is. Using out that last bit of mana, and now the right clicks are there. Breathe fire as well.
Radiant's middle tower is under attack. Dire's top tower is under attack. Radiant structures are fortified. Radiant's bottom tower is under attack. Dire's top tower is under attack. Dire's top tower is fallen. Radiant's bottom tower is under attack.
Yeah, they did Infamous. Did a very good job of flipping this game, the script over, right? They should, in theory, have taken just a little bit longer to get going, and we started to see the impacts of that as the aggression came out from Enemy first. But Infamous realizing that they have the good push potential from the Dragon Knight, also being able to get off a couple of picks there, have really just forced their opponents back before those, as you say, power spikes, right? Before those level 6s and the core items come out. Now the armlet is done on BSJ. Taking a look at some of the rest of our farm, there's really not much else to point to, but we will keep a close eye on it as an engagement is going to happen here mid, it looks like. BSJ teleporting in with Frozen. Invisible Tinker may be the initiator here. Nope. Just going to march the machines, try to keep them away from the tower. It looks like they're buying space for Sovereign to get 6, and that did just happen. So Sovereign may come in very soon here and try to get this engagement. There was a dire side scan as well, and they know that there's somebody over here, and it is the Doom. They see the Doom. They will get the stun out, as well as Tinker coming around from the south side, moving in. There's going to be the Lightning Strike as well, and the Finger. BSJ getting the last right click on that hero. Now we've got a potential 4-on-5 in the mid lane. Unfortunately, unlike Infamous, Enemy really don't have any way to then push into towers at this stage in the game. They can only slow siege with the strength of BSJ and the threat of the Rage.
A little bit of uncertainty there as Greedy ended up getting caught out for Infamous. And yeah, there's just Boots of Travels up. There's a Roar up on the Beastmaster as well, so they feel a little bit safer. And you saw they had to huddle up behind the tower there. They were worried about being run at basically by Infamous. As far as itemization, probably drums coming out here for the Doom. I'd like to see him get like a blink or something else fairly quickly because he needs to be able to reposition himself to the fight to either get to the back or get to Lifestealer and make sure that they're doomed up. And I mean, if he's able to doom the Tinker, for instance, that's basically going to stop his effectiveness for that whole fight, and that's going to be really important for them going forward. He certainly needs that mobility to be able to maneuver against the vast amounts of control that Enemy possess.
He either needs to be able to doom out one of these supports, as you mentioned, or if the Tinker is there, but Tinker usually won't be there at the beginning of the fight, right? But if he can also grab this Lifestealer while the armlet is on, that's actually a lot bigger than I think people naturally realize. Here we go. Lifestealer's going to hop out of one of the creeps there, and Infamous is going to lose another hero. A nice smoke rotation coming out here and giving BSJ yet another kill. He is now on top of the net worth, even though he is well behind the Stormspear in terms of last hits. It just comes from those kills. He is sitting at 2-0-2. A re-engagement potentially coming out here from a smoke of their own. Splitting around this camp cluster of trees, looking for something. This may not be the best way to engage. The smoke has been revealed, but the Hawk dying there. They know that they were seen. Sovereign trying to get away. He eats into a tree, and he does juke out Infamous. Look at all these stuns he had, but he just did not expect that. That was a really nice teleport play by that Beastmaster.
Yep, finding that little nook in the trees, and I like how BSJ has had to play this game, knowing that he can't really just sit in the lane and farm, and doesn't necessarily do that particularly well past the early laning phase compared to other cores, and because of that, you know, he knows he has to hitch a ride, go around, pick up kills, and get momentum that way. He picked up a tower bottom as well when Infamous were sieging top, so they're just going to have to keep up that tempo and just keep dictating the pace of the game here if they want to be able to win this. And at some point, I think they knock down these tier 1s, go for Roshan, and then they can start going for more serious objectives beyond that, and they're going to have to do that fairly soon, I think, because of the really good start that Infamous had, just like huge experience edges, and yeah.
There is that forced bubble that comes in at level 9 now because of 6.87. Level 9 is like level 11. It takes more experience than the levels around it. And right now, Infamous, all their heroes are running into that bubble except the Storm, right? All their heroes are hitting a point where they have an experience lead, but they don't have a significant level lead. I really think that Enemy need to make sure that they're striking during this period to close that experience gap when they can, because otherwise the next opportunity they'll have is when their opponents are running into level 11 and they already have their level 2 ults. So this is a great timing on the smoke potential for those reasons that we were saying. Also, Infamous don't have a item advantage right now, so moving into this sort of a gank is really necessary to keep Enemy in control of this game. They are going to see this Lion. Flying Zebra immediately getting into position for the Hex. He's got the follow-up stun if he needs it, but it probably won't, yeah. Just breaking that Pinata open haplessly. The Witch Doctor flops around until he dies. Storm Spirit will get out. Sovereign will miss him. They can push onto a tower out of that as well. Meanwhile, the counter smoke once again coming out of Infamous. Will they get something out of it this time, though? Infamous seemed to expect that after that kill, Enemy were going to collapse into the jungle and farm, and that just wasn't the case. They're going to try to move on to the Tinker. Slayer caught unawares and will probably pay for it. That negative armor really hurts, and look at all that damage. This appears to be a potential tower trade as well. The Dragon Knight is going to push a lot faster than anything that the Dire have to offer, though. They could get this tower and then still respawn top.
So it was an interesting play there. It was kind of risky because they smoked just 3. They were maybe trying to catch Enemy retreating, or ideally, instead of, like, I thought they were just going to run at the mid tower and take that down, knowing that Enemy were going to take top. Instead, it ended up working out for them because they managed to catch the Tinker. But if the Tinker wasn't there or had joined his teammates, or if Enemy had retreated in numbers, which I guess seemed unnatural given the fact that they just secured a kill, then those 3 heroes of Infamous might have been in some trouble because the Storm had retreated. Instead, that worked out for them. So a nice rotation there coming out from Infamous, able to secure another Tinker kill. And, you know, we talked about Enemy have managed to get some pickoffs with their bombs and the combination of mobility that they have, but they haven't managed to kill the cores of Infamous. And DK remains unscathed at 4-0, and Storm hasn't died either. So that's going to be something to watch. The bigger these cores get, the closer they get to items that can help them survive that burst, the harder it's going to be for Enemy. And we see an armlet coming out for Dragon Knight as well. So
Totoro is invisible here. He now reveals himself the Sovereign and is going to try to do as much as he can. He throws down as many slows, gets the Electric Vortex as well. Now the Doom is out on him, and Sovereign will likely die to this, and he does get out. However, the finger goes on to Totoro, is also stunned, but the Siren Song, is not enough to save. Too many spells had gone out in the meantime. Now BSJ comes in with one of those Ancients, throws down the fire, and then starts chopping wood. He's now moving on to the Disruptor, but the Witch Doctor Ultimate doing work, and the bounces from the cast. BSJ does not have another Rage, does have the Armlet toggles. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fight, I hear some missiles. That was a great engagement by Infamous. A really nice reinitiation attempt by Enemy, but they just lost too much too fast that fight. And out of that fight, Witch Doctor is actually going to grab a sub 18-minute Midas that he should use right away because he's wasting time.
Yeah, a good engage there by Infamous. Doing that Beastmaster quickly was a good decision, and ultimately didn't manage to get off his spells or just have that aura and standing in there right-clicking, just have that body, which might have turned the fight for EnemyGG. The Storm was nearly saved by the sleep, but ultimately did go down, and you know, we've talked about Storm's weaknesses, some of the ultimates and control. You certainly saw that manifest itself there. All 1400 HP, excuse me, of his was just burned through, and he didn't manage to pick up the Bloodstone charges from that fight. So a mixed bag if you're EnemyGG, but certainly a setback in terms of tempo, as Infamous feel like they're in control of this game for the time being. They're kind of dictating where these fights happen.
Yeah, now as this game goes later, do you feel like they will continue to maintain control, or are they likely to at least maintain control? Or does this Lifestealer Tinker Beastmaster trio provide too much sort of global initiation for Infamous to feel comfortable.
I think the key again is going to be the item progression here. I mean, we see the Beastmaster is going for that book. He doesn't have a blink dagger, so that limits his mobility. And the Tinker also is close to his blink dagger, but both of these items will certainly help. It gives them more range from which to launch, and they also need to do some dewarding. A lot of vision up on their side of the map right now that is showing Infamous where they're coming from, and they've used up a number of smokes already, so they don't have that much in terms of resources to make something happen. And you're starting to see right now partly what the Naga can do as well, and in the sense that she can help keep lanes pushed out even as support, and that vision is going to give them knowledge of where enemy are going to strike from, and it just makes it harder to launch attacks outside of vision, and it feels like you have to cramp up, kind of like we're seeing mid before you can even get going, and that's certainly not a situation that enemy wants.
I would agree. Maybe even a casual gem buy here would be good. Just the aggressive vision coming out of Infamous is by far and away outscaling what enemy have been able to keep up. And as this game continues to go on, even with the Beastmaster, enemy are going to find themselves playing at a vision disadvantage if they aren't able to get out and knock down some of those wards. And the knocking down those wards prevents future wards to go up in a similar spot safely as well. So some of these aggressive smokes from Infamous have been partially just to make sure that they are maintaining control. And another scan, this time coming out of the Dire side as well. I actually do like that enemy have been aggressively using that scan. They have actually caught out heroes with that scan twice now, and have a general sense of what's going on here. Beastmaster should know that he needs to back up.
Yeah, they're baiting this. I mean, they're expecting an initiation onto Kotaro. They're hoping for like an Infest plus a Tinker TPing in, and so that they can turn it around. It's not going to happen. And enemy moving in a somewhat huddled fashion. They have managed to get things pushed out a little bit with the Tinker, but you know, you look at the item choices coming out recently. You've got the Dragon Knight going for that Midas, in addition to the Witch Doctor. So they really feel comfortable at this point. They don't feel pressure that they need fighting items, and they can kind of keep investing in this late game even more so than they've already been able to. So again, I do feel that. You know, once again, a theme of several other games yesterday, the clock is ticking a little bit for the less greedy team that needs to make things happen with their superior mobility and kill potential.
Absolutely. The double minuses here, I normally really hate to see late minuses come out for teams, but just because of how the control's been going and really how late game it does look like Infamous have more ability to collapse from fights onto objectives than their opponents, the minuses are not necessarily the worst idea in the world. I don't absolutely love them, but I can definitely see the appeal. We'll see if it causes them to bubble out and give a window of opportunity to enemy or not. Because if they had not gone Midases, they would have gone for more combat-oriented items. They would be more active during this period of the game. So for enemy, in order to punish those Midases, they need to be getting in and getting kills regularly for the next 6 or 7 minutes. They're trying to do that now with a smoke up onto Flying Zebra and et al. Lifestealer swooping in behind as well on the Ancient Black Dragon. Throws out the fire. And is starting to move on to Greedy. There's going to be the Airspike though. Wow, Tinker throwing in missiles from far, far away. Kotaro coming in, however, and he's getting ready to move on to the Tinker. Tinker gets away. Now Frozen is under trouble though as Sora throws out the right clicks. Another missile is just not enough. There's going to be a nice stun coming out of Flying Zebra onto the Witch Doctor. Cancel that ult, but Flying Zebra will probably pay the ultimate price for it. Sovereign going down meanwhile on the north side of the fight. There goes Flying Zebra. The engagement just was not enough. And Tinker, I really don't feel like we're getting very much utility out of that pick right now. And remember, if enemy lose this game, they are essentially mathematically out of Manila. There's a very, 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 very small possibility, I think, if they win every other game, including their next game against Infamous, that they may move forward. But I think there's literally only one option out of the couple of dozen potential outcomes that would lead to that. So, enemy have their backs against the wall here.
Yeah, and, you know, a good fight there by Infamous once again. Greedy was able to sidestep that static field just long enough, static storm, excuse me, to get off that Doom onto the Lifestealer, which stopped him from continuing in that fight. That allowed his allies to come back in, turn things around. Kotaro actually missed most of the initiation into that fight, burnt a ton of mana trying to basically zip through the middle of the fight, but actually missed, but it still ended up being okay. because that Doom got off, and the rest of Infamous were able to come back in and really start to mop things up with that DK in the back lines. And once the lines break for NME, this is a team that if you flank them and you have their softer, squishier heroes in the back, once the lines break, it becomes a very difficult fight for them to take. Whereas Infamous, again, have a lot beefier lineup. They have a little bit more margin for error, and they can absorb a lot more punishment on the front lines. So, yeah, like power versus finesse, that's one of the themes of this game that we talked about, and we're seeing Infamous execute that better so far.
Yeah, the other aspect to that we maybe haven't talked a lot about, but probably should, is that this is the stage in the game for this patch, on average, you start to see winning teams start to really take advantage. And what I mean by that is, usually you're not seeing opponents take advantage before you don't normally see teams take net worth advantage of greater than 5,000 before about the 24-25 minute mark. Infamous are following that to a T. They just passed the 5,000 net worth advantage recently, and they're continuing to execute on that. The Midases are just going to scale that even further. But if you do consider the fact that Midases don't provide very much combat potential, and you take that away from their net worth, they're pretty much right at about that 5,000 net worth advantage. This is the stage. 5,000 net worth advantage is usually where you are a full item ahead of your opponents constantly. It's usually the stage where every hero on your team has more utility than every hero on your opponent's team, or at least the majority of your team against your opponent's team. And that's where you really start to see these runaway games tear off. In addition, the experience is well in Infamous's favor, right? 5 of the top 6 levels on Infamous, and all of their heroes at level 11 or higher. This is that bubble that I was talking about, the second bubble, the final bubble, where the experience lead is going to stay in more or less neutral for enemy. From this point forward, if they don't go out and take ganks right now, they will be playing into a level deficit until they start getting serious teamfight wins.
Yeah, they're almost out of smokes, and enemy are right now being vigilant and being afraid of their own gank rotations. You don't want to be sequestered up here as a team afraid
Slayer's
of
going to be moved on here, and that is all she wrote.
Yeah, just look at how enemy are moving. They're kind of hiding in their jungle as 3, anticipating a gank. They don't have much in terms of smoke resources left. There's a blink up on the Lion, but it just doesn't feel like enough. They're going to lose Roshan at this point, not really able to contest this, especially with that Tinker down. Perhaps when he comes back to life, BSJ scouting this out, so maybe they'll try to make a move onto this. And, if they give this up, we talk about the Dragon Knight. He's got the
They're going to
BKB
try to move on to
now.
BSJ here. It's tanky to get rid of that golem, but it is not impossible. He's immediately doomed up, and through the rage, he runs. He can't toggle his armlet, and Greedy's going to blink in forward. He almost gets past that kinetic field. The Dragon Knight will, and he's got a BKB up as well. Frozen trying to help. Will go down to the storm as well as the Witch Doctor, and there goes BSJ as well. That scout really ends up not paying off, as Flying Zebra is now being moved on, and Sovereign on the south side as well. The finger goes out. At least they get the Naga Siren, but that is a low-quality consolation prize. Now Sovereign trying to chase after Greedy, not able to. Will turn around onto the Dragon Knight, throw out the Primal Roar. Tinker coming in, having just died, almost able to get the kill. Instead, will laser to try and save himself from the Doombringer, is now being chased down, and that will be a 6-man wipe over the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, not a good situation there. And, BSJ maybe getting a little bit overzealous, not respecting the right-click damage of Infamous to bring down that golem. You talk about the Naga net, and this is something we hadn't mentioned, but he is able to net these ancient creeps, whereas no other magic will really go through. So they're able to net that thing down, hold it, and kill it. And then with the Doom coming out, BSJ just not able to participate in that fight basically at all. He had the Radiance as well. I've seen this build come out from him a few times, but he's just not able to have impact in these fights, even though he's only died once. Like, if he gets doomed, he basically has to run, and or maybe he makes the conscious decision to fight to the death and just take advantage of what his hero has anyway. But the fact that one spell can take all that net worth and just turn it fleeing for the foothills, it's certainly not the position you want to be in if you're Infamous. I mean, if you're
the Naga Siren net definitely made that fight. That one net. Everything else that happened there fell out of the fact that that one net caused BSJ to be out of position, right? Through both Rage, he can do that, and also through the Ancient Creeps. So that pick, by far and away, has worked out for them. I mean, he's only won 3 and 7, but the utility that he's been providing in terms of his rotations, he kept the Beastmaster from getting his levels early, which really threw off enemies' intended scaling into the mid-game, and provided all the opportunity that Infamous had. Now remember, Infamous are playing as gatekeepers here because they can't really move forward. But it's really about the honor at this stage, I suppose, and they are not taking it lightly. They are playing this game as though they still have a chance.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned that we will talk about it, I suppose, and you know, how hard would it be for them to potentially throw this game? And obviously, there's the bad perception of some South American, Southeast Asian players, you know, being more prone to do that sort of thing, or some scandals in the past, especially with their old teammate Z-Talk under fire for that. So how easy would it be for them to just ship it in and just mess around? But no, they're gonna take their best approach to this and try to win this game. And it's been done very well so far. I think they played their strategy to a T.
I will say Infamous, like most teams in their region, in the South and Central American region, often have trouble collapsing on the high ground. It's just something that culture of play usually has more trouble with in North America and Europe and China. So it's not over yet for Enemy. As we're going to see another fight, the Primal Roar is going to be going out. Now the Storm coming in. The Silence will miss. There's no kinetic field. There's going to be the Cyclone Staff as well, keeping Kotaro in safety. And now Sora coming in with big damage. He's got the stuns. He's got the breathed fire. Slayer caught by the Storm on the eastern side, and Slayer trying to do anything he can. He will manage to secure one kill. The Doom's also gone down, but now the Witch Doctor throwing out a big ultimate. BSJ is going to have to stand in it, using his ultimate, get out of it temporarily, and now it is the... Wow. The tail is wagging the dog as Enemy turned this around. Sora 1v2, 1v3 will end up going down, tries to make a trade. Beastmaster barely walking away, and BSJ coming out as a goddamn monster that fight. And that was all over the place.
Yeah, given how the fight started, I would have thought it would favor Infamous. He had the Doom looking for the initiation, didn't get it, and the Roar actually came off on him. So they didn't have that Roar initially for the Dragon Knight and the rest of Infamous's heroes that came crashing over. But ultimately, I think what really turned it there, the Lion bought back in the middle of that fight, TP'd to the tier 2 tower, and was able to blow up the Storm before he could get out. So Storm didn't get as many charges out of that fight as he wanted. It looked like he was going to really run wild there too, because he managed to dodge the kinetic field from the Disruptor. But ultimately, he did get a little bit low. Lion managed to finish him off, and then there was just DK left holding the line. And that Radiance probably did some work there too, in terms of missed attacks from the Dragon Knight and such. So nice fight there. Banana Slam Gemma picking up some much needed kills there. He's got a Manta style out as well. And this is an interesting pickup. Again, this is an unusual build that we usually see from Lifestealer, but it gets him out of the net and makes him a little bit harder to find and target, perhaps causing some confusion for the Doom as well, who ultimately end up dooming the Beastmaster. So a clutch buyback there from Flying Zebra, your favorite player, your boy on the Lion, to help turn that fight. And a nice hold from Enemy, because it felt like if they got cleaned out in that fight, they might have just GG'd out. And right now, the bottom tower is deniable for Infamous. Hopefully they'll notice it and remove it themselves.
A big part of how that fight ended up swinging, too, was that the Storm Spirit got too far ahead of his team. I could barely keep him on the screen with the rest of the fight. And I realized that he was trying to zone, but at a certain point, he started going for kills instead of just zoning him. Kotaro, once again, one of these players that plays the margins, likes to really skirt the edges of what is impactful. Sometimes gets a bit too far forward, a bit too far out of there. Banana Slam Jamma is big enough now that he can 1v2 pretty much anybody on Infamous as long as the Doom is not available to knock him down. And when you're worried about that sort of strength, you can't have one of your heroes off being ineffective, knocking down supports whose spells have already been used. Like, the Disruptor was not a high priority kill there. His ultimate was already down.
Yeah, if anything, that fight highlighted the difference between a doomed BSJ and an undoomed BSJ. Yeah. The previous fights, we saw him doomed and usually just running with his tail between his legs, and they lost the fights handily. But this time, he was kind of allowed to run wild, and they really paid the price. So if you're Infamous,
BSJ's going to be moved on, and this is a doomed BSJ, and just look at him get torn apart.
Yeah, just as we say that, it's a doomed BSJ, and yeah, that's kind of what you want to do if you're Infamous. You want to make sure that your Doom goes on to that hero for the time being. Even the Tinker, I don't think you're worried that much about at this point, because he doesn't have that much in the way of damage. I mean, he doesn't have a Dagon. He isn't scaled as you would expect a Tinker to scale. And he's just not that big of a threat. They can usually just overrun the rest of his team and then get to him on the backlines with that Storm. So you let the Storm handle the Tinker if necessary, and you just save that Doom for good old BSJ. Keep Greedy alive at all costs until that's able to happen. And that's got to be your ticket into these fights for Infamous.
Dire knows this Roche is going on because they do have this nice ward here, but there's just nothing they can do without BSJ around. So much of their strategy is contingent on him being a frontliner and being able to actually stand and fight. The Doombringer has done wonders in shutting that strategy down. Into a Doom, you really do need to have two potential heroes to run the front lines. If you only have one, he immediately gets doomed, and then he has to run away, and your entire team is without any defensive frontliner. The supports start to fall underneath the marching hooves, and everything falls apart for you. Beastmaster is sitting on top of Necro 3 Blink. He still has brown boots, looking for those boots of travel so that he can engage with the Tinker and with the Lifestealer and these bombs coming off of the Hawk, presumably. So they are going to go for a global gank strategy at this stage, it looks like.
Yeah, these are the frontline issues we talked about earlier, right? Like, there's a lot more meat on the side of Infamous. A lot of their heroes can take more punishment, and they have two sources of healing from their supports. For Enemy, that's just not really the case. Everyone's pretty soft and squishy with the exception of the Lifestealer. So he has to position himself both that he can actually come in and assume that frontline role when necessary, but not make it too obvious that he gets immediately doomed up and just taken out of the fight. So really tough spot for them in terms of execution, and they're nursing 5-digit deficits right now in experience and in net worth. So things are not looking good for Enemy, both in this game and in their hopes for advancing to the Manila Major itself.
They are going to smoke up and try to bait out Banana Slam Jamma. He has been too far forward a handful of times here, and has been punished on that. They seem to be trying to leverage that to their advantage. Kotaro thinking about moving in, as is the rest of his team. There's going to be the net here, presumably. Net does go out, and there will not be the follow-up. They have a sense of what's going on here. I don't see any Radiant wards out here, though, so they may not know how many people are around. There we go. There's going to be the Blinking from Flying Zebra, but he doesn't get the stun off in time. The BKB does come out, but the Primal Roar is there as well. Big stun. However, wow! The Naga Siren getting in with the 4-staff ultimate, almost saving up that Doombringer. Not quite enough. Kotaro now is going to be hexed out with no Lincolns. He's got no survivability. Immediately down. The Aegis will be used, but they don't have a silence for him now. They do get the Earth Spike perfectly timed, and Kotaro will be going down as well. BSJ getting that double kill, really well engaged by this team. That Naga Siren ultimate was almost a game-winning play, but he just didn't get in soon enough.
I have to point out the item choice here by Storm Spirit, going for that MKB to deal with the Radiance and the Tinker. I don't think that's a good choice here. I think if you're worried about the Tinker laser when you go onto him, you just get a BKB. It insulates you from all of this lockdown and disable, with the exception of the Roar, which is probably not going to be used on you in the first place unless you're way out of position. It really allows you to freely roam around in these fights and not just die to these kind of cheap lockdowns and combos. And that decision is really coming back to haunt them, because, I mean, how many right clicks is he getting off in these fights with the MKB? How worried are you really as a Storm about the Tinker lasering you or the Radiance? Because you're not man-fighting those heroes with this setup of items. You really just need to get around, make sure the Tinker doesn't get too far away, and maybe pick off some stragglers. You don't need an MKB for that purpose. You need a BKB much more. So the wrong King Bar being chosen here by Kotaro, and I think it's really started to hurt them. And I feel like they would have closed out this game by now if that hadn't been the case. And instead, these fights are a little bit harder than they need to be.
The other aspect of that is I can understand him wanting to have the MKB for the slow of the overcharge, make sure that he hits so that he gets the slow, and these fights don't fall out in such a way where the Storm Spear is way ahead of his team because his team can't keep up, right? Like, physically they can't run that fast, but the MKB would give them just as much potential to make sure those overcharges are landing. Now the Lifestealer has actually built out a defensive Lincoln Spear to deal with the Doom, presumably. That's an option. There is not a Cyclone Staff on anybody, but there is a cheap Orchid that can be cast on BSJ in order to pop that Lincolns, as well as a handful of other decently ranged spells. We'll see if that ends up working out for him or not. It really is still going to depend very much on his positioning.
Yeah, there's a lot of answers for the Lincoln Sphere. You know, Infamous, despite their leads, find themselves in a bit of a tenuous position right now. A lot of the momentum in terms of the farm and such has stopped, and, you know, your Storm Spirit's nowhere near that BKB. And if he gets caught again, I mean, this Bloodstone has more or less backfired.
Flying Zebra's going to jump in without his allies here. There's going to be the Blinking from Sovereign, the Primal Roar as well. BSJ popping out. There's the Kinetic Field, trying to keep anybody out from this fight. And now they're going to move on to Greedy. Meanwhile, the Dragonite is trying to frontline. The Storm Spirit coming in from the backside, taking a kill. Now BSJ is all alone. The ultimate from the Witch Doctor, the stun from the Dragonite. Can BSJ get out? He cannot. He does end up going down. down, a gem on the deck. That's a 4-man wipe for Enemy. And I as much as I love Flying Zebra, I can't help but feel that he forced his team into a really bad engagement there. Running into the high ground, not having vision where the opponents were, and Radiant just rip through them because of it. No buyback on BSJ, by the way. This very well could just be game. Well, no, we still have tier 2s up, actually. Fortunately for them, tier 2s in both the outer lanes, so probably just a set of racks, as long as Enemy just give up the racks and don't try to engage.
Yeah, not a good spot to be in right there. You know, and because of the mobility that Infamous have as well, with some Blink Daggers in the Storm, it's kind of hard to just disengage and just say, let him die, let's get out. They kind of just committed themselves there, and, you know, the Roar definitely didn't go off on the target that you want on that Naga.
Excel, everybody's going to leave him to die. There's only... BSJ's still not here, although the buyback is up on him now. They're going to grab a free Excel. Infamous, a little skittish on that point. They do have BKB up. They have the Storm Spear sitting at pretty decent mana and health. Without the Lifestealer, they probably could have rolled through that fight, but they decide to play it safe. It would have been a risky fight, I suppose.
That was the safest play I've seen from them this entire qualifier. Let's put it that way. But I could see their concern. I mean, the supports were up. You have to worry about BSJ potentially pocketing that buyback and waiting for the lockdown to come in. The Dragon Knight does have a BKB, but he can't really BKB TP out. So if he did have that BKB, as long as they could keep some damage on him or follow him, they would eventually be able to track him down with the help of that buyback. So I could see them not really wanting to risk things there, and you know, just open themselves up to a potential death. And Gem's going to come out in the Storm, so they've got to look around and find these wards, clear out the rest of Enemy's map vision to make them have to kind of huddle together. And it's a good pickup finally for the Storm Spirit. And because that last fight, I mean, he's up to 3,000 gold, so he's actually close to a BKB if he wants it.
That gem was purchased by Enemy and dropped in that last engagement where the Witch Doctor blinked in. I believe it was on the Beastmaster, but I'm not entirely positive. He does have an empty slot, so it implies to me that it was on the Beastmaster. Yeah, they traded that gem out. So in the point in time where what they really needed was to play defensively and not lose more structures, what they ended up doing was give their opponents as much space as possible by allowing them to freely roam and knock down every bit of vision that Enemy have. Enemy did manage to hold their barracks there, though, and they're by far from out of this. They are 15,000 net worth in deficit, but as long as they can keep that about steady, the amount of items and buybacks at 15,000 gold buys starts to wane after 41 minutes, right? A 15,000 gold deficit doesn't mean as much at 55 minutes as it did at 35 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to you've got to win fights.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to wait for this next Roshan. And actually, the Aegis actually did factor in a little bit to that last fight, so I mean, we'll see if that matters here, and we'll see if it's contested if you're Enemy. I think you pretty much have to contest this, and you know, it's, again, a really tough spot for them. Even with that Lincoln Sphere, the Lifestealer is basically slotted, and he's not getting much stronger from now, and the level of strength that he possesses right now just doesn't quite feel strong enough, and just a tough spot to be in right now for Enemy.
Yeah, they have to give up these outer tier towers as well. There's just no reason to believe that they can defend them. And that does probably mean that they're also giving up the Roshan, but high ground defense with this sunken tower strategy so that the Dragon Knight still has to come onto the high ground in order to chip away. That seems like their best option, especially with March of the Machines on the choke point. Anything else, especially with the Storm Spear able to so readily zip in behind and start creating chaos, it seems risky. I'm getting distracted by a glitch. I don't know if you heard that. The ball lightning sound continued for like an hour after he stopped on my screen.
The Tinker has really been pretty underwhelming this game. He needs more items up. You really want to see, for example, that E-Blade Dagon, which would help against the right clicks of Infamous as well, and you know, have burst potential on the supports. And really, there's just none of that. He ended up going for that Bloodstone, but what does that really give you other than maybe an extra round of spells? I mean, considering that he's a core, compare his impact to that of the Dragon Knight, who, as we speak, is 14-1 right now, and is just basically 6-slotted. You know, there's just no comparison there. That's made the fights really hard to take, and just put a lot of weight onto BSJ's shoulders for putting out damage in these fights. He's going to go for that Mjolnir now, is BSJ, to probably help deal with those illusions a little bit.
Unlike the infamous Dragon Knight as well, the Tinker, as you mentioned, it just does not frontline. That's entirely on BSJ, and it's really that draft decision has really been hurting Enemy in a way. they're going to try to move on to Roshan. They should be able to take this pretty quickly. The question is, will Storm engage? He's the only one who's going to be able to make it. He is going to try to seal. He drops his bottle. Maybe not. Yeah, he uses the last charge, drops his bottle. He's getting ready to zip in. Can he time it correctly? Dragon Knight, meanwhile, going in, doing a bit of scouting, and actually forces him out of the pit. Mantis illusions have been used by the Life Sealer. They're doing pretty good work onto Dragon Knight, who does have a Moon Shard, purchased and active, by the way.
Yeah, he's absolutely huge, and he's going to regen up some of that HP with the heart. And we see Doom, just watch Doom's positioning. He's going to wait. He's going to wait till everyone has shown themselves before he comes in. So let his frontliners do their work so he can make sure that he gets off the Doom onto the right target. So smart plays coming out. Of course, Doom change with Infernal Blade in the place of Level Death. He cannot pop
Alright,
the
it looks like
himself
BSJ is going to go
but...
in finally. He's moving on to the Dragon Knight. The Primal Roar goes out as well, and BSJ just tears through him with the BKB and the Rage. No team, or heroes from neither team can actually get in and do anything. Now the Doom going out into BSJ. As he gets stunned, with the creep on the high ground. The Siren Song as well, buying out the time while the Static Storm is down. And they will re-engage after BSJ has gone down. BSJ is going to buy back, but way too late. Frozen also going down. Meanwhile, on the south end of this fight, Kotaro is going to be able to get that Lion. And Sovereign taking quite a bit of damage. No more buybacks available here. Slayer's missing missiles left and right. And unfortunately, the Dragon Knight did go down, but he's got buyback. Kotaro escaping death and getting some more Bloodstone charges. He does also have a Scythe of Bicep now, which is really rough. BSJ, there are just so many answers to him. The Rage is not enough to buy him some space, and I don't know if you caught that, but Beastmaster's Necronomicon creep on the high ground actually created a perma-stun situation with the Paralyzing Cask in the BSJ. So, a little bit of a misplay there. Really costing them that fight.
Yeah, he's got to be saying, you guys want me to carry you, at least don't make things harder
right.
For us here. And, you know, very fortuitous kill there onto the Dragon Knight. He kind of got that proc with the Mjolnir that was able to bounce and kill the Dragon Knight. And actually a pretty funny situation because they waited out the Doom. Like, absolutely, they waited out till there was a chance to pop his Lincolns and get that Doom. And then actually, after they Doom, they had to run away from him because he decided, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go down with you guys if you guys want to Doom me. And actually, they had to run away from him and barely escaped as the Doom ticked down. So, a really good fight there, taken, I would say as good as a fight as you're going to get for Enemy. You managed to secure Roshan to offset the buyback from your Lifestealer, and you managed to kill the Dragon Knight, almost killed the Storm, and who actually went for that Scythe. And if he died there, again, Bloodstone charges go down, you don't have buyback either. It would have just been a much more difficult position. And so, I think if you're Enemy, given how that fight began, it was probably about as well as it could have gone. And right now, you're kind of banking on the second BSJ life really being able to take its toll. He can play much more aggressively now because he's a little bit less concerned about that Doom. He knows that if he gets doomed, he's just going to keep right clicking regardless. And so he doesn't have to care nearly as much. And I don't know, maybe if you're Infamous, you can reconsider a different Doom target.
I do really like how BSJ's build is prioritizing attack speed as well, so that the Feast can do work into this Dragon Knight. Otherwise, if he did go for just pure damage, the high armor coming out of his opponents and mobility would allow him to get kited much more effectively. But with this build that allows him to get out of the net with the Manta style, allows him to clear creeps and illusions very easily with Mjolnir, it's fairly defensive and it gives him very high attack speed. He's really just relying on his ability to chip away based on that HP-oriented skill. And that will scale much better into the late game than raw damage.
Yeah, that's a good point there. You know, I kind of hadn't expected the game to be at this state where you had Infamous with huge leads, seemingly in control and really find themselves in such a tough spot now, but Enemy have done a good job of playing this to this point, certainly. And Lifestealer is going to walk right past the Witch Doctor, who notices the Radiance burn and instantly gets himself out of there.
For those of you just joining us, by the way, this is Infamous vs. Enemy Game 1. It is running a bit longer than the average game, but it is also Enemy's last stand. If they don't win this game, they are basically out, if not mathematically out of Manila. Infamous do not have a road to Manila, but they are playing admirably and trying to make sure that they are moving in as gatekeepers and protecting their own armor. They're going to blink onto Slayer here with the Doom. Slayer really has no way to get out of here. He does have a buyback, but the Bloodstone makes it so that he comes back so fast. Only 27 seconds. He does buy back anyway. Flying Zebra is going to be going down, and the Witch Doctor ultimate with Ag just tearing through some opponents. Stormspear will end up going down, and now Excel is going to be moved on as well, but the Dragon Knight, the big boy, is here. He wants to move on to Slayer. Slayer did buy back here. A death would be a very long respawn counter, especially for a hero otherwise relying on the Bloodstone. That's 45 seconds, and now BSJ has to stand and fight. He's moving on to the Dragon Knight. Dragon Knight clearing out as many of these creeps as he can before he goes down. There's not a lot of options available, especially since BSJ does still have the Aegis, and now the Naga Siren does have Song. She's trying to get away. She will blow the Song. She does not have a TP, though. And BSJ will end up pulling back. All things said and done, that went about as well for Enemy as you could have expected, other than the Tinker buying back and dying. That might be a big deal later on.
What I like about this game so far, Gorgon, it's made me feel like, in terms of prognostication and late game understanding, that I have no idea what I'm talking about. Because these fights have just gone, even how that fight started. I mean, basically it's 6-slotted DK, meet 6-slotted Lifestealer, and just get absolutely destroyed in that fights in the man fight. And actually, what's really become interesting here, we talked about the Naga transition. This game has gone late enough that the Naga is now beginning to go for that Radiance carry build herself. So pretty soon, if you're BSJ, you're going to have to fight a whole other core hero. And he's done really well against the two that Infamous possessed so far. Can he handle a third if this game keeps on going? And it's just become a really interesting game.
Is so impactful against BSJ here because, once again, almost all of his effective damage is coming out of that Feast. Right, he's really relying on the Feast against this 2560 HP Doom, and this, it won't show me, but probably well over 3,000, maybe over 3,500 HP Dragon Knight, right? The Feast is everything, and you aren't getting feasted if you're having that mischance. That Radiance is a big core item, and it will allow the Naga Siren to start to farm up and push against this base like water against rock, just eroding it away. But even more importantly, in these team fights, it's going to hit BSJ and force him to drop an item for a Monkey King bar at some point. Maybe on the BKB actually wouldn't be a terrible choice as well, because this rage isn't lasting long enough in these fights. But the BKB doesn't really help into the Doom, which has been a big portion of his problem anyway.
Yeah, and Tinker, he's really got to get himself into this game. He's down to 6 Bloodstone charges, and again, he still hasn't gotten any of those premium items that we usually see up on a Tinker, like a Hex, Dagon, or any really source of damage output. And
he's
the Naga is basically ahead of him.
Blade, so he's trying to get there, but it is a slow struggle, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and the Naga's basically ahead of him at this point in terms of items and gold. And, if you see the team's 4 position on the other squad getting into the game as more of a late game core than your mid, that is certainly not a good prospect if you're Enemy.
Doom fighting Excel here for some last hits. No big deal. This BKB on Doom is still 8-second duration as well. Right, so while the Dragon Knight's BKB has dropped down to 5 seconds, and yeah, he is sitting at 3850 raw HP without the armlet on. So 7.5% drop down with every right click. That Feast is just ripping him apart. But Doom is getting really close to 6-slotted. He can make a Mjolnir out of his Maelstrom. He can get rid of the armlet, and then he can upgrade to Travs. But
some item progress to note here. Very interesting pickup for BSJ. He's got that Bloodthorn, and that's going to, of course, improve the rest of his team's right-click, and obviously give True Strike as well if there's any sort of Radiance evasion, or potentially that Butterfly that you picked up in the short term. And it's an interesting choice. It gives him some of his own lockdown and control, too, onto the Storm, who, as we mentioned, still doesn't have a BKB or Lincolns or any sort of defensive item.
Right? And, he doesn't even have a Cyclone stack to defensively get rid of a silence. Granted, there hasn't been a silence so far this game to hit him, but you would expect a silence to eventually come out against a Storm Spirit. And at this stage in the game, it's really odd to see a Storm Spirit with no defensive response to that.
Yeah, and you're seeing enemy supports actually get off more control spells than they should in a fight, it feels like.
Okay, we're going to have the media fight here as Excel is just blown up. And the ward will also be knocked down. The gem is sitting on top of Beastmaster. So Vision's starting to go the way of Enemy. This game could go really late.
Yeah, he's got a refresher as well. In terms of itemization, I'd like to see enemy supports pick up either additional Lincoln Spheres, which is a lot of gold, or like Lotus Orb to help protect their Lifestealer even more. I mean, they have to know that Lifestealer is basically all their chips are on the table behind the Lifestealer. They have to be able to ensure that he's able to keep dealing damage and not being disabled or doomed. And especially since he no longer has the protection of the Aegis, you don't necessarily want him buying back all the time just to have a chance in these fights against Doom. And so the more that they can keep him alive and allow him to dish out damage, the better. And I think they need to start itemizing in that direction and just really count on him here.
They're going to get ready for an engagement here as the Doom comes in, tries to move on Sovereign, will move on Sovereign. The refresher is going to be used. The Prime Roar moving on to Greedy. Greedy is standing and taking a beating from BSJ, but meanwhile on the backside, the Dragon Knight is simultaneously moving on BSJ, who does get Doom. BSJ does go down. He does have a buyback as well. The Beastmaster also sitting on buyback. Nobody on Infamous sitting on buyback. Everybody on Infamous getting a little low in the March of the Machines. Can the Tinker do enough to save his carry's buyback here? It seems unlikely, but it is possible. Let's see if he can one-man stand against his opponents.
I don't think so. There's still plenty of time left.
Protection. Jeez.
There's still plenty of time left on this
necessary.
dragon. On this dragon form. So.
There we go. They're going to be moving in. This could be a last stand if BSJ does not do well. The silence on the Kotaro, but immediate sheep going on to the Lifestealer, who does not rage tune enough, and now Slayer also going to be going down. That is probably your game, yeah. GG going to be called. More than likely, Enemy just fell out of the Manila qualifier. Infamous playing the Gatekeepers into a 54-minute bloodbath. Enemy did a very good job of trying to bounce themselves back into this game, and they will go back for an honor-based game 2. Theoretically, they could still move on to Manila with very, very unlikely outcomes outside of their control in some of the other matches, but for all intents and purposes, Enemy are now out.
Yeah, I think the top two teams in their group, FDL and Digital Chaos,